LinkedIn and YouTube. So let's begin. We left off 2 weeks ago. We had a break last week. We left off speaking about Jacob. Um, there was a little to say about Jacob, not so much about Isaac, Yitzchak. So Jacob, Yaakov, right? He was the younger son of Isaac, who was the younger son of Abraham. We left off last time speaking about his marriage. Jacob wanted to marry Rachel, Rachel in Hebrew, the younger daughter of Lavan, Lavan his uncle, brother to his mother Rebecca, Rivka. But Lavan tricked him and he said, no, 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 that's not the way we do things over here. You can't marry off the younger daughter before the older one. So he ends up marrying Leah first, and a week later he marries Rachel on condition he works for another 7 years. He worked 7 years to marry. He was thinking he was going to marry Rachel. He was tricked, and he had to work another 7 to be able to marry Rachel a week later. And that's what happened. And then he ends up working for another 7 years. Well, just under 7 years. It's 6 years, um, and then he spent some time traveling, and that gives you the 21 years that he was away. So for about 6 years, he works for Lavan, so he could, grow his wealth and make a deal about the sheep, which sheep he keeps. And again, Lavan kept changing the deal, but God helps Jacob so that he ends up being very, very wealthy with a lot of sheep, even with all the dire conditions, the very strict conditions of the deal that Lavan made. Okay, so moving on. This is about the handmaidens and the 12 tribes. So we know that in total, Jacob married 4 wives. We said Leah, Rachel, and also he married his 2 maidservants that Laban gave him with each one of the wives, each one of his daughters, Leah and Rachel. Bilhah, who let's go back. Zilpah, who was Leah's maidservant, and Bilhah was Rachel's maidservant. Leah had Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Reuben, Simon, Levi, Judah. And then she had a bit of a break, and then she had Zebulun and Issachar. Okay, 6. And then also a daughter, Dinah. For many years, Rachel couldn't get pregnant, and therefore she asked Jacob to marry her handmaiden, right? Something that we saw before with Sarah, who asked Abraham to marry Hagar. At any rate, Bilhah, Rachel's handmaiden, bore 2 sons to Jacob, Dan and Naphtali. After Yehuda, Judah was born to Leah, she also had a bit of a break, as we mentioned. And during that time, she asked Jacob to marry her handmaiden Zilpah. And Zilpah had Gad and Asher. So if you're keeping count, we're up to 10 tribes, 10 sons. And after 7 years of marriage, Rachel finally gives birth to a son whom she names Joseph, meaning to give in addition. She was praying for one more son because with prophetic vision, the wives knew that Jacob would have 12 sons. So some 8 years later, Rachel gives birth to the last one of the Jacob's children, last one of the tribes, Benjamin, Binyamin, and we'll speak more about that soon and what his name means. So after the 20 years in Haran with working for Lavan, his father-in-law and uncle, God tells Jacob it's time to go home. Jacob consults with his wives, Rachel and Leah. What do they think? And they agree that their father's a crook and a thief, and they have to leave. And they leave secretly. They gather all the family, the children, and all their sheep, and they go out to the land of Canaan. Nobody knew, but Rachel had stolen her father's idols just before they left. Not because she worshipped idolatry, she was hoping to win him off of idol worship. Laban realizes that his idols are missing, and he sets off in a hot pursuit to get them back, assuming one of them took it. And very soon he catches up with Jacob's slow-moving camp near Mount Gilad. And however, that night, God appears to Laban in a dream, and he tells him, sorry, not in a dream. God appears to Laban, and he warns him not to harm Jacob in any way. Next morning, Laban says, "Why did you leave? I was so good to you. I would have made a goodbye party, and the only reason why I can't harm you now for taking away my daughters and grandchildren is because God appeared to me." But Laban says, "Why did you steal my idols? At least let me keep my idols." Jacob didn't know that anybody stole the idols, and he said, "Look, over the past 20 years, I gave everything to watch your sheep, watch your flock with total devotion. I took responsibility for any losses incurred. I was cold in the winter, the sun burnt me in the summer, it was terrible conditions. How could I have stolen anything?" And Jacob goes so far as to curse whomever stole the idols with death. He didn't know that his beloved wife Rachel had taken them. And the Talmud tells us that this actually contributed to Rachel's untimely death. She died before her time. Before Jacob and Laban separate ways, they make a deal that they can never pass the spot that they stood with the intent to harm one another. They could pass it for business. And they put together a pile of stones as a sign of their deal, their covenant, and they call it Gal Eid, the witness heap. It says in the Torah, Genesis, that Laban actually called it by the Aramaic name Gal Sahadusa, which means the same thing. Okay. When Jacob gets close to the land of Canaan, he sent messengers of peace to his brother Esau, and the messengers returned with bad news because Esau had gathered 400 men, 400 fighters. He's on his way to kill Jacob, taking revenge. Right? Jacob stole his blessings from their father Isaac. If you remember from last week's lesson, Jacob was shaken, so he did 3 things to prepare for Esau's imminent arrival. So he prepared himself for battle, dividing his whole group into 2 camps so that one would be attacked, the other one would escape. Number 2, he sent a very generous tribute of livestock and servants to Esau. And number 3, he turned to Hashem in humble prayer, asking for divine assistance. And that very night, Jacob takes his family across the Yabok River, Ma'avar Yabok in Hebrew. And after everybody passes, Jacob has to go back to collect a few small jacks he had left behind. And suddenly, an unidentified man approaches him and attacks him. And they wrestle until daylight. Morning comes, and Jacob is holding his own. And eventually, this man identifies himself as Esau's guardian angel, enclosed in human form. And he asks Jacob to let him go. He has to go and sing praises to God. He does this every morning. Jacob refuses until the angel acquiesces to the blessings Isaac had given him to so many years ago, and the angel does so. During the wrestling, this angel dislocates Jacob's thigh, and that's why to this day Jews do not eat the sciatic nerve. Ashkenazi Jews don't eat the back half of an animal at all. So do not offer me filet mignon because I can't eat it. At any rate, the Torah tells us, however, that as the sun rose in the sky, God healed Jacob's injury. So the big moment comes. Esau is approaching in the distance, and Jacob walks ahead of his whole family and bows 7 times to his brother. And the Torah says Esau was very moved by this display of respect, and he runs forward, and they hug and they kiss and they both cry. And Jacob shows him his whole family, his wife, his children, and they part in peace. Esau wanted to work together to help him, but Jacob realized that his display of brotherhood was only temporary, wouldn't last. And so he tells him, he hinted that in a future time, when the time of redemption will come and the world will be at peace, then we'll meet again. But until then, he realized it wasn't a good idea. Jacob took his time getting back to his parents, and on the way, he spent a year and a half in a place called Sukkot, or Sukkot, before he buys a field near the city of Shechem, which today is Nablus. The man in charge of Shechem, his name was Hamor. Hamor means a donkey in Hebrew, but that was his name. And his favorite son was named Shechem, like the city. And the Torah tells us Dinah, Jacob's daughter, the only daughter, was out alone, and the prince Shechem rapes her and tries to convince his father to arrange their marriage. Jacob's sons are very, very upset about what happened, and they devise a cunning plan. And they tell Hamor and his son Shechem that sure, yeah, Dinah, or sister, could marry the prince, but there's one condition. Everybody in Shechem has to get a bris milah. Everybody in Shechem has to circumcise themselves. And they agree. They think it's going to be wonderful. They're going to marry Jewish girls. The Jewish girls are going to marry them. However, on the third day after circumcision, Simon and Levi, they took up their swords and attacked the city, and they killed every adult male, and they rescued their sister. Though Jacob understood his son's actions, he disagreed with what they had done and rebukes them. And he says, now we're going to have issues, and other nations are going to attack us. Later, Jacob gathers his family. He tells them to get rid of any idolatrous items they might have picked up in Shechem. Tells them to get rid of any idolatrous thoughts. And then they travel to the site where he had the vision of the heavenly ladder, as you remember from last class, right, in Bethel, where he offered the sacrifice of thanks to Hashem for saving him. And he offers sacrifice to Hashem, thanking Hashem, God, for saving him from being killed. God appears to Jacob and tells him, from now on your name will be Israel, not Jacob. Israel comes to the word Sar. I believe we mentioned it in previous classes, which means like a ruler, a prince, a minister. And Israel means one who rules over angels and men and overcomes them. As we pointed out, it's interesting that his name is after struggle, not after the success. Now, right, it's true. The full meaning is because he overcame them. But the actual word, Sar, means the struggle, the wrestle, which is a beautiful virtue. Somebody who's always fighting the fight, even if he doesn't win. Who would rather have somebody that wins, but when the going gets tough, he gives up, or somebody that doesn't necessarily win, but he's always fighting, always gives it his best? Then, tragically, Rachel dies when giving birth to Jacob's last son, whom she calls Ben Oni, the son of my pain, the son of my affliction. But Jacob calls him Benjamin, in Hebrew, Ben Yamin, the son of my right, because the Holy Land of Israel is considered to be on the right, and Benjamin was the only son born in the Holy Land. So this is right outside the Beit Lechem, that she goes into labor and dies. Jacob built a tomb for his beloved wife on the side of the road. He did not bring her to the family tomb in Hebron that Abraham had purchased from Ephron, right? Because he saw with prophetic vision that the Jews would be exiled by the Babylonians later on, and they would go by there, and Rachel would pray for them and arouse heavenly mercy for her children. We'll stop here for today. The next part is about Joseph and his brothers, which is a whole different section. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm Rabbi Chernitsky from Chabad of Newfoundland.